Let's get started with prayer. Okay. Father, thank you for today. And as we wrestle with technology and how it affects not just our families, if we're parents, but just as Christians in general, we're appreciative of what technology offers in terms of the benefits, but we also know because of you on the user end, because we are sinners and we live in a sinful world, that the use of technology, not in of itself, technology in of itself, but how we use it and approach it and our attitudes towards it can affect our discipleship and our usefulness in our walk. And so grant us discernment and having a balanced view of it. And we ask for your help in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, I hope this is helpful for you. I think it's maybe, Andy asked about like spiritual disciplines. So it's not exactly spiritual disciplines, but I think it does require it. So maybe in an applicational sense. So we'll go through the notes and start us off with the two contrasting stories of that I heard from one pastor, and these are actually true instances of two different families that are very different on his visits. So there's no names here and etc. And no one, I think, would be able to guess. I'm not going to mention the pastor's name, but the first family, he arrives as a guest for dinner, and then he walks in, and there's this giant LED TV. Not a problem, but just a frenetic pace. The four kids are present, but they are in studio photos on the wall. There are some faint sounds from the distant bedrooms. Small talk is interrupted by one of the teens who peeks in, only to ask, "What's for dinner?" To which dad reminds the son, "Hey, we have visitors. You need to greet them and say hello." On which he says, "Oh, hi," and so he's deliberating whether he should go out with friends for dinner or stay home. That's why he asks, "What's for dinner?" And so he asks to leave to the restroom, wash his hands before dinner. And as he goes down the hallway, he passes by the three other children who kind of complete the family puzzle in some sense. They haven't come and greeted him or anything like that, but they are in various states of transfixion, plugged into a matrix of various ports. One of the kids is on a futon, as he writes in emo oblivion, provided by iPod earbuds. Another teen is on PlayStation, and third makes a cameo appearance to collect dinner on a tray before skulking back to watch TV in her own bedroom. Okay, so you get a picture of what this family's like. And then mom yells dinner, And so 3/4 of the kids come to the table finally, and mom insists that all the phones be put on silent since guests are over. Okay. So compare that to another family, and they receive an invitation with email technology to come over. And this is not an Amish family, of course. They use email. He's greeted at the door, he and his wife, the pastor, by a couple. And to his surprise, both of their teenage boys are at the door. And he and his wife are informed that the oldest daughter, they have 3 kids, was working a shift that she couldn't move because she works at Starbucks, and she relays her heartfelt apologies for not being there. So they're led into a spacious living room filled with books whose spines have been satisfactorily broken and used very well, There's no trace of a TV. Furniture is centered around the piano. The two boys who are there, they're very engaging. They're asking intelligent questions. They're offering informed opinions. And so this whole family is showing affection to one another. And when the son offers to show him and his wife his latest gardening project, the entire family and them, they go outside for a tour. The kids were respectful, engaging, joyful. They had cell phones, and they would go off. They would beep or ring, and he noticed that they largely ignored them. No one died, right? There were iPads, laptops, Kindles all over the living room in the house. But he writes, that they were like powerless paperweights. They were not controlling the family, but controlled by the family. And so he says, that family did life together. Their motto was this: family comes first. When the kids are alone, they can listen to their music or email friends. But when they are together, they need to be 100% there. So what do you think about those two families? Any thoughts? I think that's realistic. And these are two real families he's talking about in his pastoral visitation. Okay. So it makes us think, I'm older than you, but back in the day, they used to have a lot of unplugged, right, music, right? That used to be a thing on MTV. Is MTV still exist? Okay. Yeah. But I remember, every great grunge band had an unplugged album. You had to have one. And so it just, just old school acoustics, just amplification for your voices. And so it's just brute musical skill without the crutch of technology. And so I remember listening to Kurt Cobain, maybe you don't know who he is, of Nirvana, sing "Come As You Are" unplugged, and I thought that was the best thing. Right? It doesn't compare at all to the radio version when it's live and unplugged, and so being fully wired and joyfully unplugged is the contrast. I think it's a helpful illustration that the pastor gives. So let's look at some statistics just to kind of help us to think. 78% of parents, I don't know when the survey was, but it wasn't too long ago, believe raising kids is more complicated than when they were kids. They were kids. Any of you feel that way? Maybe, maybe not. Some things man hasn't changed, okay, but we have things that we didn't face. Any of your parents talk about technology like iPads and email? No, maybe some of you, but there was no discussion. That wasn't exist. It was new. My first phone was this rotary phone. We had phones on the wall with the cord. So it says 65% of parents said technology and social media was the most difficult challenge, more than a dangerous world, declining morality, financial challenges, bullying, demands of jobs of their own jobs as parents. Okay, the average person checks their phone 81,500 times a year. Okay, or about once every 4.3 minutes of waking life. Okay, so one thing is when men in particular are gripped by holy ambition, then good things tend to happen. But the opposite is true when they're not, right? Homes are led poorly, wives are frustrated, churches are unhealthy, bad things happen. 94% of teen boys in the survey are addicted to video games. Okay. So I know that's household to household, and it could be fun, but I think there's this addiction and a lot of waste of time. And so I would argue instead of fighting kind of real battles and growing in manhood, we have less, I think, not just of the stereotype, but of biblical manhood and the neglect of responsibilities. Video games are very different now. It's not what I grew up with, old school Pong and Super Mario Brothers. Okay? It's, competitive gaming like Fortnite, RPG games, right? Role-playing games that are really kind of long story that may take anywhere from 200 to 400 hours to complete that game. There's whole worlds you can conquer, but it's all fake. Okay. So, and one of the cluster sins with video games is often, statistically and just pastoring, is porn. So, and it's compounded with poor relationship with parents, friends, even later your wife. There's a lot more isolation. They're not always clean. Okay, dirtiest. Well, I won't say. I can't rat out like my son. No. I mean, he's grown responsible, but and I don't forbid him to play games. Okay, but it's just kind of and I played a lot of video games when I was growing up, but I think the landscape of that is not the same. We can't make those assumptions like we used to. A typical teen sends and receives 30 texts per day. That's just typical. And the irony is that actually cultivates greater relational awkwardness. Communication is harder. It's easy to do it like this, but it's actually another thing to do it in person. And I think it's, in some sense, I would argue it's less real. It diminishes our ability, especially as Christians, to relate with one another, especially with people who are different than us. So we find now with the digital age, people kind of cluster with folks who are more similar with them. And they have less engagement with alternative views. They don't know how to debate, civilly. And, it's just, and you see that in social media. Okay. I'm not saying it's the result of the digital age, but these things are complicated by it. 61% said they want to see if their online posts are getting likes and comments. Okay. I mean, there were times I felt encouraged if I got a lot of likes, or more loves, and if I didn't get any, then I was like, but my children are honest, like, being on social media, people, if they not say it, but they're looking for affirmation. They're looking for some, praise and things like that. So I think that spiritually that may feed pride. Okay, there's a lot of opportunities with social media, including for the gospel, but I think it's also fraught with temptation. Okay, so I will confess with you. I was on Instagram. I wasn't really into it, but it seemed like everybody was on it. I was probably last to the game. But then I remember being tempted by some of the things that would pop up. And so, after clicking on one, I repented, and then, and it wasn't pornographic or anything like that, but, it was in that vein, So I remember telling my wife, Sandy, and she didn't say anything. And I said, I said, I want you to know I deleted my account. I don't want to be on IG anymore. Do we all have to make that choice? No, I'm not saying that. But for me, I was like, this is not helpful. I don't need to be on it. So my family will show me all the posts that are like encouraging or helpful, from their friends or church members. And I go, oh, they'll show me, Dad, see this. But they know I'm not on it. So that's a choice I made. So technology is not evil in of itself. We all understand that. I don't think that's a new problem. But next to this, 80% of teens sometimes, or often feel good about themselves because of social media. But I think the opposite is true as well. They feel bullied or depressed. They have false body image perspectives. They think someone has to look like this. Again, these aren't new problems. I feel like they're old problems, just like I grew up with. But it's higher exposure. It's more heightened. I think cyberbullying is pretty awful. I don't think the cruelty has increased necessarily, but the manner in which it quickly goes out and can spread um, and it's less countered, becomes more, sadly, harder. Okay. So, a 2019 report said that teens spend an average of 7 hours and 22 minutes on their phones a day. I don't know if that's true, but it's not unbelievable. When you think about that, that's a whole workday. Again, it could be different person to person. And this 2009, this is before COVID. Okay, keep that in mind. I mean, do you think things are better post-COVID? Do you think discernment and compassion and dialogue are better because of technology? Right? Again, it's not because of technology, it's because humanity, right? Depravity. Technology has made life easier, but not necessarily more joyful. And we can waste just as much time, be more distracted, disconnected from people. Their loneliness has increased. People are busier. Even though we could be productive, but it doesn't equate. We're less relational. When I was young, a microwave was a huge deal. I mean, I can't imagine not having a microwave now. Imagine going on the stove or oven for everything to heat it up. So I love microwaves. I mean, I had a typewriter, I told you guys earlier, in college. When I was a youth pastor, I was the only youth pastor probably in the world who still had a pager. You guys know what a pager is? Okay. So, you pull off the road, put a quarter in, and then make the call, where you send those messages, email. I didn't have email. I registered for classes at UCLA. We had the cutting technology. It was my first semester. I had a quarter. I had to go in and line up to register for classes at the admin office at UCLA. And then the second quarter was big deal. Is now they have phone registration, and then you get two slots, right? The first slot you could sign up to 8 units, and then the third slot for the rest of your classes. And then you would get the code, and it's called URSA back in the day. And then you register for your classes using your telephone. So obviously things have changed a lot. Next bullet point. Today's parents are really the first generation to shepherd their kids in an immersive digital age. Okay? So, yeah, I remember growing up when I was a kid, when the phone rang, we all ran to get it. One of us went to get it, because if you didn't get it, then you didn't get any phone message. And so I would say for maybe not all of you, but maybe you receive instruction or guidance, but I think a lot of people in my generation and yours, we didn't get a lot of direct guidance, especially spiritually, guiding us through some of the issues that we're facing. Okay. Any of your parents talk to you about like email and social media? Any of you? A little bit? Okay. All right. So kind of like a lot of things, in some sense, I feel like the church is a little bit late to the game in general. So section 2 is putting technology in its proper place. There's kind of a little teeter-totter there. It could swing either way, but I think the lordship of Christ should give us balance. Okay, it's not a good illustration, but you see the triangle, the point. But if our theology is strong towards technology, then think of, instead of that triangle, think of it as a square. Okay, it provides more stability. So the greater our knowledge of God and the Bible, the better we're going to manage a healthy balance. Because we can't just be Amish, Technology could be used for good, for the gospel. In OC at the time, there was another church that rented from where we were, and they were a Persian Iranian church, and the pastors all had to flee Iran, right, for their lives. But one of their ministries that they had with other Persian churches is they did satellite TV Bible study beamed into Iran, and they were sharing all these like wonderful things, like massive revival happening. Churches were growing. Christians were like busting through the doors. I mean, they had persecution. And there's been recent cases where, many were killed. But there, I think technology was serving a purpose to share the gospel, to do Bible study in a way that, we might not have access to, or believers there can't be encouraged by in previous generations, right? So it's useful. I mean, we have podcasts, we have access to a lot of great resources. I mean, even my study, I'm still old school. I use physical book commentaries. I still prefer that, but having Logos and, Bible software and, online articles is tremendous. Okay. So those are things we can praise God for. But you can see it could be helpful and beneficial, right? We could worship God. There's freedom of lordship. There's blessed opportunity to serve and love people, usefulness. But technology, we could worship gods rather than God. There's some enslavement. There's dangers. We could serve and love ourselves and feed our hubris and pride and self-promotion. We can waste our life, rather than being useful. Do you see the contrast? But it doesn't have to be a sharp swing from one end to the other. And so the question is, how can we balance that? How can we, not necessarily be Amish and kind of, we're in the world but not of it. How do we approach that? So maybe what are some good things with technology, right? Give me some examples. What are some positive things or semi-neutral things that you appreciate? I'll give you one. GPS is huge. I used to use paper maps, and in the early days of the internet, MapQuest, and print it out and take it on the road with me. But, there's ladies, I don't say ladies, but my wife's one of them. They don't know, they can't get to places without their GPS. Even if they've been there like 100 times, I'm like, no, you shouldn't have to look at it. But maybe for traffic's huge. So even planning to get here this morning, I can even change, right, the time of departure and see the average time it takes, because I don't want to be late, and all of those things are helpful, or to avoid traffic or find the best route. What are some good examples of technology today? Yeah, that's a good one. Email in general, yeah, and encouraging, what else? Yeah, that's huge. Do a video call, right? Can you imagine being a missionary and not seeing your family for years and years? Or taking a ship and crossing the Atlantic and taking 3 months. We take those things for granted. What else?
Back in the day, we heard songs on the radio, and we'd have to just guess what the lyrics were.
Yep.
And I would get it wrong, but now I can look up music and I know what the lyrics are.
Yeah.
And even the chords for guitar.
Yeah, you can look it up too if you don't know. YouTube has the translation. Someone came up to me this last Sunday I preached like 3 weeks ago, and they came up to Pastor Jay, look, your message is in Chinese, and then you can see it like the closed captioning. I go, oh, and I'm like, I don't know Chinese. Is it accurate? They're like, yeah, it's okay, it's not bad. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty incredible. Any other things? I mean, really, there's a lot, but we throw out some more. Yeah. I know I'm a proponent of physical Bible, but I don't think it's sin to use a digital one. I use the YouVersion app for my Bible reading. I love that. Just today I'm supposed to read this, so I'm behind, so catch up here. In our church, like maybe you guys do the same, like new parents. So we do the meal delivery sign up. or you deliver meals, right, with DoorDash or something. When I was in youth group, we didn't have PowerPoint. We had transparencies, and we had that like the light go on, and I had to physically change the song. So that was one of the things I did. Email, weather. I mean, we find news instantly, okay, which is nice, but also has its drawbacks. Online banking. It took me a while. I was up until last year, I was still going to the bank to deposit my checks in the ATM. And then someone at church said, "Why are you doing that? Just use your phone app." Now I just take a picture of my deposit. I'm like, this is fantastic. I'm slow to the game. I was the last in OC I was the very last member to get a smartphone. I had a flip phone for a long time. So, anyway, we can go on and on. Cameras, there's workouts you can find on the app. I think the video calls are helpful for our deployed soldiers, and their families. So anyway, what are some maybe down negatives? False teaching. Yeah, that can be disseminated easier and faster. Yeah. Yep, that's huge. Okay. I mean, I don't know how many things I see in the news and you compare it with another news report. Okay. So I'm going to have gun illustrations, so I apologize. But the sad situation of the Boston shooter recently? You guys know? The guy was shooting people in Boston. Well, when you watch all the mainstream news reports, it's the state trooper put him down. But when they had the live interview, I was watching it with the press conference with the sheriff, she said it was the officer and the armed citizen with the concealed carry license, that they both partnered, and bullets from both of the civilian and the officer were put that man down. Sadly he had to be put down, but the mainstream media only says the police did. When the whole story is because people want gun control, so they're not going to give credit to an average citizen. Make sense? Okay. That's the best example, but there's a lot of curated information. Okay. So, with fact checking, like you can sort of do it on your own, but it's challenging. Who has time for that? And so you can see, like, I'll just be blunt. People are brainwashed about things even when the facts don't really add up. So, what other challenges are there with technology these days? Access to porn. Yeah. It's anonymous, it's easy, it's quick, it's free. When I was young, it took effort. Like if I wanted to see, I was too scared. Because it meant you had to go and you couldn't go buy it. So an anonymous aspect of that has become. We've had several sisters, collegians, okay, have struggling with porn. Okay, it's not just a problem with brothers, but girls sharing in our biblical counseling that they started watching porn when they were like in 5th grade, and they're addicted to it, and they're collegians now. So it's sad. It's something I was just shocked by. Ever have that sick feeling after Netflix binge? Maybe that's just me. Like, what a waste of time. Why did I do? The algorithms, they know what they're doing. They're trying to get you hooked. They're trying to have you buy their product, have you follow a certain narrative. I think AI, there's benefits. That's a debatable topic, but I think I would suggest that it's challenging the struggle of critical thinking. Okay, so I haven't seen it, but I want to see it. Anyone see the Social Dilemma documentary? Okay, I heard it's outstanding. It's talking about some of these issues, and it's not a Christian one, but I think it's on Netflix, or Prime. But it's called Social Dilemma. I think our patience, How many of you have received a handwritten letter in the last year? Okay. Oh, okay. In the mail. Isn't it? It's actually kind of special when you get that. So there's a period I bought a whole stationery set and I said I was going to write a letter to my wife once a month. I did 3 and I kind of quit. So I should resume it. But she appreciated it. She's like, "You mailed it from the church office? The church office is a mile away." But I think getting it in the mailbox is different than me handing it to her, no? So I think there's something special about that. It kind of heightened it. Recently, or not too recently, but that person who committed suicide because AI therapist said you should kill yourself. Okay. So there's just a lot of things, FOMO, a lot of downsides that come with the use of technology. So a couple things to consider. The dual creation mandates of Genesis 1:26-20. There's 2 mandates for all mankind. First is procreation, that is, be fruitful and multiply. That has macro implications, and we're seeing it now. You need 2.1 children per couple to sustain a society or civilization. So, China is bearing the brunt of that with the, one-child policy. Okay, now they're trying to pay people to have kids. Korea is now the lowest birth rate. It's like 1.1 or something, maybe less than that. Europe is basically becoming Muslim, if you don't notice. Europeans are not having kids, but the immigrants are having a boatload of kids. And so Western Europe at some point is just going to become Islam. Okay. So, and then just on a macroeconomic scale, Japan, they're like Korea and other nations, they're facing just a practical economic productivity burden, but you need live bodies. Who's going to take care of the aging generation when there's less people birthed by that previous generation? So it has an impact on the economy as well. So, Japan, they're trying to develop robot technology to take the place of human interaction. A lot of it just out of necessity. Okay. And economies get crushed, like how do you take care of, 3 times the population of ahead of you and all the money and productivity that's required? It will dismantle national economies. So I don't say this to like make us fear, but eventually we're gonna have to pay the piper. Okay, the social and economic burden is going to be bad down the road unless it's addressed. So when God commands us to have, I'm not saying that if you don't have kids that's a sin, or certainly if you're not able to, the Lord doesn't provide that at a certain time. It's not. But I'll just be blunt. If you get married and you're not willing to have kids at all because of convenience, you shouldn't get married. Okay, because part of it is a command: be fruitful and multiply. Not telling us how many, or if we try but we can't. That's not any fault of our own, but it has implications, not just on us individually, but our society. Okay, so the other one is dominion, which is more what we're going to talk about, and that is subdue and rule over, right? The rest of creation, and that includes technology. If you study before the flood, there was advancement in technology, in metallurgy and other stuff that maybe we're not witnesses to, and we have some record. But we need to be careful as those who subdue, right? That we are not being subdued by the world, but that we can use technology for the glory of God and the good of others. I mean, think about medicine. It's amazing. Right? I don't know if Christopher Yuan, right? He basically got paralyzed. And then I was there. He couldn't move his legs at all. And then he had emergency surgery, and then he's moving his toes. Paralyzed, and then being able to now walk again. it's incredible the technology we have, and the little cameras that can go in, and I had ACL surgery. I had 2 knee surgeries, and they just put the arthroscope, or, incredible that we have that kind of access today. I can't imagine what it was like back in the day, So praise God. Aren't you glad for the things that we have access to? This is like a little computer in our pocket. This is amazing. I could have never imagined it. So now I feel a little bit insecure when I don't have it, which is maybe a sign, at least to me. So let me read. John Lehman says this. When did we start? Oh, 2-ish? Oh man, I'm so sorry. We're really late. Okay, I'm gonna have to go faster. Okay, let's skip those quotes. You can just read on your own. Anyway, theological depravity is the question, right? Like, whatever your view is, it's totally fine. Like, guns don't choose to kill people. If I put a gun here, it's inanimate. It won't do anything. It's dangerous because of negligence or the user, or the intent of the user. Spelling errors aren't caused by the pencil. It's us. Okay. If should we get rid of all cars because of drunk drivers? I mean, that's the argument. Okay. So I won't sell gun rights, but it's the gun itself is neutral, and safety is important. But to argue technology, I'm arguing that technology not in its proper place causes far more harm than even guns. Okay? So it's always the person who uses it. Okay, so with our smartphones, this could be used for good and it could benefit us, or we can choose to use it in a way that's detrimental and harmful. Okay. One of our youth group kids went through a very difficult time because of the social media, the way they were basically persecuted and bullied, and it was painful. So those are things like I think the Bible addresses, but it's hard. Oh, do you have a question? Okay. So 3, a digital diagnostic, learning from logs versus life under lordship. Clint Archer says, I hate legalism. You cannot legislate family affections. The way to tackle this is as early as possible. Begin to live it out yourself day in and day out. If you interrupt your lecture on the value of family to answer the phone, then you are slitting the throat of the very lesson you are trying to teach them. Children will not behave as you say, they'll behave as you behave. So if you devalue the priority of family in your own life, your kids will imbibe that attitude by osmosis. Okay? So basically I'm saying it really starts with us. If we're parents, we have to set the example ourselves. B, do you need to pluck the eye out of your iPhone? Okay? So we kind of maybe need to get amputative about our temptations. Just kind of like I just stopped using Instagram. I probably had like 10 photos. You could see I wasn't on it very long. But, Matthew 18:9, gouge out your eye or cut off your arm. I mean, not obviously literal, but the thing is, are we honest with ourselves? Are we taking radical steps to protect our purity, our holiness? There's so much FOMO. There's so much FOMO, more than we had before because we didn't know. When I'm on a mission trip, and I have no access, I was in India, there's nothing. I didn't miss technology one bit at all. Yeah, I missed the salad because everything's boiled and steamed, so I wanted something crunchy, but we're just so used to it. There's some diagnostic questions by Tony Reinke. Maybe if there's discussion time, we can walk through some of those, and you could do that on your own. But the great danger of deception is section 4, parental failure to take the influence of technology seriously. Okay. At every age, from toddlers to teens, it has an impact. So I think we're kind of on this auto co-pilot with our technology. We have to be more discerning with our kids. Go out and play. Play with Legos, read a book. There's so many other things you can do. So I'm not saying bubble wrap our kids and start a commune, because we have to engage with technology because we have to prepare them for adulthood with the responsible use of technology, not avoidance of it. Okay? So number one, beyond deadly dangers. There was Davi Nunez Moreira. This was like earlier in the year. It was a 14-year-old Brazilian teen. He died this excruciating death that took a week long for him to die. And he followed the social media challenge where he injected himself with a mixture of dead butterfly and water into his leg. And then he suffered some kind of, what they believe, an embolism or allergic reaction. And he died. Okay. So, Huntington Beach versus 40th Street. This is just me. I didn't like Huntington Beach surfing there because there was no landmarks. So if I went here, entered the water here, I could drift way over there. I can't find my bag. But I loved Newport Beach because there were jetties so that became a landmark to see where I was. And so technology, if we're not discerning, it can carry us, we can drift so far from where we want to be. A profitable purpose of social media is there's feedback loops, marketplace listening. I mean, you guys probably have stories, right? I'm just talking with somebody, and then I go on Facebook or I turn on YouTube, and it's like exactly what we're talking about. I feel like they're listening. Maybe I'm paranoid. But they have clever algorithms to get us to bite. Okay, it's all intentional because they want to make money. They do want to addict us and grab our attention as much as possible. So where internet is a little bit different, the internet was invented at UCLA, go Bruins. But back then it was crude, it was simple. So what we have is different. It used to be, more, open code and things like that. But now the major players, they kind of control the internet environment, these major corporations. So rather than not that there isn't open source, but we're sort of colonized by the big giants, Meta and Google and stuff like that. And so there's money, okay? And then the rise of the mobile app. So now you don't have to sit at a desktop computer. It's at your fingertips. 1 Corinthians 6:12, it might be permissible, but not everything necessarily is beneficial. Okay? 4, most powerful choices that we make are not just specific decisions, but they're mostly patterns of life. So think about that, patterns of life, and how we do technology. Okay, I mean, technology, like Brent Kunkel says, is just omnipresent, especially in the students' world. My kids, you can't do their school homework without going online. I mean, almost all of it's online. There's the homework, the assignments, you turn in your homework, your papers. Okay, I was uploading MS Office to Toby's laptop for college, and Toby's like, I don't need that. I just use Google Docs or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay. And then you can see 7 examples of habituation. Makes them passive, creates distracted minds, decreases desire and ability to read, decreases attention span, cultivates screen addiction. There's a New York Times article that basically argued that they are the same symptoms as drug addiction with smartphones. Okay? And so on and so forth. Romans 12, let's turn there, if you would. Romans 12. And can someone read those 2 verses, if you would? Or on your phones, yeah. I feel like in San Diego, majority of people have their phones now, which is okay. Okay, thank you.
I appeal to you, therefore,
present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
Thank you. So with the first question, what is the assumption behind the opening command in verse 2? Do not be conformed. Why do we have to be commanded to not be conformed? Why? Why does he have to command us?
Our natural tendency is to conform.
Yeah. Otherwise, why would he need to tell us not to be conformed? The assumption is that we're natural. That's our propensity to be conformed. So, second, it's important for families to know that every screen, device, video game show, movie, commercial, YouTube is seeking to conform your kids and you and I to what? To this world. The world is the anti-God system. There are no neutral actors, okay? Except for maybe Christian ministries like a Bible study, if they're a legitimate one. So next one, the blank is engagement with tech means active resistance. This is the implication behind Romans 12 is I don't think we think actively in terms of being discerning with technology. We see it as neutral, and we shouldn't. Okay? It's not all bad, but it's conforming us. It is trying to conform us to the world. So we have to resist. It means active resistance. Do not be conformed. Really could translate it. Do not be shaped or pressed into the mold of this world. Okay? Again, we have to resist. We have to be almost Amish, but not Amish. Okay? If I were to put it there. Almost Amish. Okay? We have to become like Christ. And I think that's where the spiritual disciplines help us to engage with technology. So if we are not, in the Word and we're praying and walking with God, you're not in a good position to discern and make decisions about technology. Do you follow? Okay. So that really comes first. And then what is the gospel response that precedes verse 2? It's worship. It's verse 1. That's the answer, is to see the glory of Christ, to present ourselves as living sacrifice, is to have our attitude and commitment to glorify Christ. That has to come first, and then we can look into theology or technology, not reverse it, right? That has to be the first step, is having the glory of Christ on the front end. So I would say this is my strong advice. It's not a law. I can't give you chapter and verse. But device access should be as late as possible with your kids, but curated. Okay? Curated before they leave home. You got to equip them for it. So you can't put them in a bubble. But when they're young, I think you should limit it as much as possible. As much as possible. Technology is helpful. I mean, you're on a road trip and you just want to play a movie. Yeah, I think that's okay, per se. But, why do we do that? It's convenient. Is it more for the kids or is it for us, if we're honest? It's for us. So, play the road games, the license plates and, play an audiobook. I don't like audiobooks, but Sandy did it all the time. Take a nap, look outside. I remember we went to Sequoia, and my kids were on the devices. I go, look, it's so beautiful, right? And they're like, yeah, whatever, Dad. And then I realized, kids, put all the devices away for the next 2 hours. Believe it or not, when we're not actively engaged with that, we're habituating them to the screen and the need to be entertained. Okay? Give them chores. Give your kids chores. My kids were starting to wash the dishes when they're 9 or 10. They can do it. So, according to their ability. But go on walks. Try to get them away, Have technology be something that's on the side, not the main course. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so they get used to a normal rhythm of life growing up with us, so that they're not enslaved to technology, but technology is under their control, not the other way around. Okay. Parental failure takes shepherding of a child's heart seriously, that there's no boundary. Boundaries are not automatically legalistic. Okay. You got to loosen the grip as they get older. You have to give them a little bit more freedom and trust. Okay. Otherwise, when they go off to college, they're fully not prepared at all. So you rather speak into their life before they go off to college. But when they're really young, you set the rules. Be in charge. Say no, so stuff like that. So there's an easy everywhere culture. If you can give me like maybe half an hour more. Is that okay? Okay. Proverbs 22:15. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. What is the default state of our children? Folly. Okay? So we have to actively shepherd them. And what I mean by that is not just content. I think that's where we're prone to kind of go, is we're just thinking about content. I want you to think also in terms of dependence, lack of self-control, the opportunity costs in terms of what they lose in terms of creativity, hard work, playing with Legos, being outside. All of those things are lost. Okay? So we raise them enslaved to tech as they grow older. Okay? So don't fixate on content, or the bad words, or is there an inappropriate scene. Yes, I think we should pay attention to that, but that's not the only part of the equation. There's a longer term kind of discipleship issue happening. Okay? Because if you don't disciple that character aspect, then you increase the temptation for all the other stuff that's negative. That makes sense? I know you can tell me, but and then C, parental failure to take God-given role and authority seriously. So generally, men, we got to lead. Okay? So growing up, my parents knew who my friends were, and they would speak to their parents. Now, if you don't vet, you don't know who your kids are talking to online. It's a little scary. Predators and things like that. It's very possible to never meet these people because they will never come to your front door. It's all through a screen, FaceTime, video games, texting, sexting, and so much more. So, number one, I don't know what to do anymore. Well, it's hard. But you can't neglect your role. You have to embrace it. It's your responsibility. And God will give you grace. Okay? So it's not supposed to be easy. Parenting isn't easy. And so I sympathize with you. Ephesians 6, bring up a discipline and instruction of the Lord. So God gave you a role. So it's not an option for you and I to surrender that authority. So we have to disciple them, especially in technology. And I think we have to kind of catch up with it because we weren't really prepared for it, if we're honest. Okay, but kind of sucks we weren't, but we still got to do it. Okay. 3, don't give your kids any privacy with technology. At some point, you got to trust them that you formed character and now it's between them and the Lord. Just don't give it away. They can find very clever ways to circumvent it. Our kids have. They've lied to us. We had a certain router, right, that prevents stuff. They can get around it. And then when they go to high school, the router is too strict. They couldn't do their homework unless I, widened the gate. Okay. I had black and white TV. MS-DOS, you guys know what that is? Okay. But it is actually a pretty scary thing. So generally, I would say this. Don't put your kids in the ocean before they know how to swim well. Okay? Once they know how to swim well with technology spiritually, then you can loosen your grip. Okay? But you still got to keep an eye. Okay? So there was constant accountability with our kids. Nothing they can hide. Recently something happened where one of our children cleverly deleted things permanently. But they still got caught. So we have rules in our house. So there's a little chart, gradually stair step. Later is better, later is better, later is better. Who cares what other parents and families are doing? Who cares? Be wise. Okay? If they're faithful in a little, as they grow older, you can trust them with more. And if they break the rules, then you could be clear and consistent about your consequences. Don't be haphazard. Okay, but it might go from like tablet, home computer. It goes that way. Okay, so tablet could be educational game. What age? I don't know. 3, 5, 8. I just say late as possible. You decide. Okay. I think you could think of alternatives. I would suggest home computer. Our house is just early on with our kids. We had one home family computer in the living room. They can never go and have the computer on their own or a laptop by themselves. Okay, and then we would look. You could buy software that'll tell you if they download an app, and it's like it's money, but to be honest, it may be worth the money to buy some of those software. They want a phone, give them a dumb phone, a flip phone. Okay, we have Call 360, or Life 360, so I know where everyone is. That's a nice part about technology. I could track them in some sense, not to spy on them. Well, sometimes I do, but Google search. I don't know what age. I think it's kind of getting earlier because of homework. I don't know, 12, 11, 8. I don't know, but at least not unsupervised. Okay, you can find where they were, but that takes work, isn't it? For us, I'll confess, I just get lazy. I don't have time to look at everything, so the software helps. Okay, smartphone, what age? For us, it was once they start driving. Then we let them get phones. But it could be for you later, earlier. But I really think that should be postponed. For me, I wouldn't give it before 16 or before they drive. But I think most of our youth have phones now. So I'm not going to be legalistic there. Okay. And then graduation, you have less control, and virtually none. At that point, they go off to college. So TV, I'll go back to curated. Don't trust ratings. PG. That's the world's rating system. All filters don't work. Okay, unholiness is not just 4-letter words and sex. It's attitudes and how they dress and etc. Okay, so when is a good time? I don't know. Do not give something that causes harm if they're not ready for it. That's a hard thing to discern. So number 4, do expect pushback, peer pressure, and persistence. Pushback, peer pressure, and persistence. Pushback, peer pressure, and persistence, and questions. Expect that. Be real. They're not going to like it. We wouldn't like it. Okay? Especially when their friends have much more access. Okay? It could be at some level you approach each individual child. That's just a thought aloud. Some kids are more responsible and trustworthy. But beware, those are the ones you got to watch out for as well. Okay. Embrace boredom. Our kids had to be constantly. I said, be okay with them being bored. I was bored, but you find something to do. I said, there's so much opportunity. So boredom is not necessarily a bad thing. I think parents these days, we have somehow this weird pressure that they have to be active and entertained and having fun all the time. Okay, so boredom builds character. Okay, some tech-wise commitments. There's by Andy Crouch. You can kind of read them. He talks about shaping space. Kind of how you place your furniture and your devices could be helpful. Time, taking walks. I put my phone in a Faraday box. Okay, mainly because technology now, they can scan your signal from your key fob and open your door. Unless you have an old school key. But my car's newer, so there's a lot of theft that happens. That's kind of why I do it. I don't want my car gone they just open it electronically and take off and then turn on the ignition. So what is a convenience? I don't have, my car unlocks simply by me approaching and touching the handle now. But with your kids, sometimes I'll put it in the Faraday box because I'm busy. and I don't want to be disturbed. Some of you just put it on silent. That's probably easier. But I'll just stick it in there if I have to really concentrate. So 5, it's a great opportunity for discipleship. Okay, it makes life easier, but the blue light really absorbs our kids' attention, so we kind of have to gain it back. I mean, our kids can master technology pretty quickly. You know, it's like in my day, like my parents didn't know how to operate the VCR, so they asked us to do that. But it comes with a cost. It comes with a cost. Rabbis used to discourage men under 30 from reading the Song of Songs. Okay, if that was our only problem, right? Yeah. So do engage with disciples. Think of technology as a discipleship opportunity. Okay, Deuteronomy 6, right? Parenting, ought to be simple. So 3 C's of discipleship. This is from Spencer Harmon of ACBC. Company. Be present with your kids as much as possible, especially when they're young. Know what's happening, right? And apply it to the word. So if they're watching movies with the kids, preview it if you can. Double check. Sometimes, I remember we were at McDonald's once, and some people at the table over were saying and watching things that were not helpful. So I could just ignore that, or I could, when we get home, I can engage with what just happened. Okay. If you go to a restaurant, right, try to sit in an area where the kids can't see the TV on the screen, or even for yourself, the big game, but kind of give your attention to your family. Okay, conversation. This is Deuteronomy 6. Okay, so I remember we were watching a Disney movie, and the man and women who aren't married, they kiss. And then my kids, they giggle and they're bashful. They cover their eyes and they do this and they want to see them kiss. Well, they don't know what to do. They're little kids, so they're a little embarrassed. You can stop it and then talk about it. It's not God's design for you, if you're not married. But it's beautiful when you are married. Play up the beauty of it when you are. That's just an example. C is curation. Is curate what your kids are exposed to, right? You can buy a router. We had Griffon, but you can buy software. I think Custodio is one. Do Covenant Eyes for your older kids. Porn is a big problem. And don't you decide without apology, okay, to them or other parents. When Toby got older, when he was about 17, we watched Band of Brothers, and I skipped there's one inappropriate scene. And there's a lot of them. But we talk about the reality of war, but they hear F-bombs everywhere. So it becomes an interaction, a positive interaction to talk about, what our soldiers endured and how war is not romantic, and the Holocaust. We talked about that at the end of Band of Brothers. Okay. So our kids put their phones, they don't ever have them in the bed. Even our collegians, they just put it on the kitchen counter. What they do at campus, I don't know, but just no wide access. Okay, but you want to do all 3: company, conversation, curation. Okay, B, use technology to bring your family together. Bring your family together. So there's any number of ways to do that. I think saying I love you on a device is different than saying it verbally in person. Okay. And one thing that doesn't happen well is confrontation. Okay. So C is regularly fast from technology. To bring the family. Turn off TV, don't have TV. We're not, so far we're not willing to get rid of our TV, but have limitations. But our kids always had device limitations on time and where they can go. Have a home cooked meal over candlelight. Make it fun. Okay. Have a Sabbath rest. Okay. Blue light affects your sleep patterns. So there's other things. Build your life around not having a TV. When you finally do have a TV, almost nothing will change, Andy Crouch argues. Cast a bigger, a more beautiful vision for life. So it's not just put off, but put on. Okay. So for the Christian life, for your future spouse, for the church, for the kingdom, for serving others, have people over more often. Regularly evaluate biblically for wisdom. Because technology environment changes. 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about different challenges with technology, probably. One, the temptation to be reactionary towards technology as much as to avoid radical discipleship, if needed. There's those two temptations. Don't be reactionary, and also don't avoid radical discipleship if it's needed. Number two, technology gives me the opportunity to do the stupidest, most carnal, and wasteful things, or to do the smartest, most spiritual, God-honoring things. Do you see, right? It's both. Okay? Don't get rid of your technology. Embrace it, but for the glory of God. So, and it's not just hidden sins like porn. If I spend 3 hours on Facebook, I might not have looked at porn, but I don't think it was good to be mindless that long on Facebook either. Okay. 3, is technology a gift, bringing us closer to God and to each other, or a God that moves us away from Him and us as a family? Is it a gift that brings us closer to God and each other, or a God? Okay, an idol. Okay. So, don't just talk about limitations, but how can we glorify God with what we are facing? Okay. So sometimes nudges, those small changes in your environment actually make it easier to make better choices. Number 4, is technology an opportunity for me to disciple my children, or is technology discipling my children? Okay, that's the question. Is technology allowing me to disciple them, or is technology discipling them? Obviously, we know the right answer is we want to disciple them. 5, can I thank God for it and my use of it with a clear conscience? Can I thank God for it and my use of it with a clear conscience? So this is just part of your evaluation grid, okay, when you're thinking through it. It's without giving you a long list of answers, a legalistic list, okay? And then 6, are we using it to do good and bless other people, or is it about my selfish gain? There's a lot of narcissism with, social media, okay? So 7, am I an approval junkie, right? Am I cultivating vanity with, when my post is liked, or is my goal to hear, well done, good and faithful servant? 8, only listening to the Bible does not require the same concentration as relational Bible reading. Okay, I think it's good to listen to the Bible, but it's not the same. 9, is it permissible but not beneficial? Is it enslaving us? Is it distracting us? These are questions. Number 10, what practical changes, even radical ones, might we need to make? Okay, and so you see the little triangle, how I can use technology, and so we put 3 points there. Glorify God, receive it as a gift, do good with it. Okay, kind of let that be your discerning touch point or grid to evaluate that on your own. Try to skip a lot of these, but 5, the reality of spiritual warfare. Okay, analog to digital, audio to video, image to movement, disconnected to almost always being connected. Okay, Galatians 6:7 says, "Do not be deceived; God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap." The same is true here. Okay, so even just smartphones specifically, it's like a minefield of temptation and danger. But it's also a fantastic tool. Okay. So I'll quote for Jurassic Park, right? I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power you're using. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Okay, sorry. I thought that was pertinent, but okay, and you can read the rest. But there is a constant siege, right? I mean, throw out some examples of media, right? Facebook. What else? IG. TikTok. Fortnite, Call of Duty, Disney Plus, Netflix, Twitter, Candy Crush. My wife is addicted to Candy Crush. People reach for the phone an average of 150 times a day. I think that's makes sense. Okay, whether you're typing, swiping, clicking, an average of 2,617 times a day of those functions. The highest 10% touch their phone, in some function 5,427 times a day. So even Steve Jobs, they don't let their kids have access to technology because he knows. Okay, and he's the one who creates this stuff. Okay, so a quiz, you could see, how quickly do you pick up your phone in the morning? Mine's right next to my bed. So, because it's my alarm and other stuff. And then sometimes I get calls late at night for a counseling situation. So, but, they deserve a significant amount of people sleep with their phones. So, there was a guy in Las Vegas in 2016 who married his phone. It's a little weird. I mean, some guy in Korea married his body pillow. I don't get that, but okay. 12 Ways That Are Changing You. That's the title of Tony Reinke's book, but I listed them there. That's a helpful book. But he says in a survey of 8,000 Christians, 54% admitted they're checking their phones the first thing. 73% they checked their phones before any spiritual discipline. And so, it's a problem. Okay, so they did a study. I forgot. I should have give you the footnote, but they found that it had same effect as like the people who have depression. Okay, so last section: how Christ frees us from screen slavery. Okay. Paul says, such were some of you, and the Spirit, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are profitable. Okay. Your body is not made for immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord is for our body. Okay. Or 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own? For you have been bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body. Okay. So despite brokenness, there's some encouraging news, is the gospel. Jesus came to destroy the power of sin and reverse the curse. So even with technology, even though there are temptations and there's failure, right? We sin with technology. The gospel bears on our hearts and lives, and we shouldn't forget that. What we need are new life disciplines birthed from a new set of priorities, empowered by the freedom that's in Christ. So one of the ways that we deal with this is we cultivate higher affections. Then you don't miss it as much. Okay? Right? We discipline ourselves in what we delight in. Okay? If you're going to be distracted, find more productive distractions, or find substitutes. Don't just put off. Don't just say no. You got to say yes to something better. So when my kids were young, I remember Sandy dropped the kitchen knife on the floor, and Toby ran to try to get it. And Sandy grabbed it, and he started crying because he wanted it. Okay, and so I just went and found some toy and gave it to him instead. Otherwise he's just standing there like, I want that, but I gave him something better in its place. Okay. Put on the Lordship of Christ. Okay, you can read all that. Let me read Clint Archer there. I'll read and we begin to wrap it up. If you're in Christ, you're no longer in charge of you. Jesus isn't your co-pilot, your co-regent, or your co-lord. He's your Lord. He's your master. What he says goes. You are not at liberty to sell your heart, your time, your eyes, your body, or your words to any other master that comes along. He alone owns you. the implication of this, and this is, you were bought with a price, glorify God with your body, which we read earlier. He says, the implication of this then is that we don't get to decide what to do with our phones. Certainly there's an element of Christian liberty is how we use technology. We certainly are not at liberty to become dominated by any other master. That is off the table just by definition. We are already owned. We work for King Jesus, and he cares that we are not owned by our phones. Let me put it this way. If we are so consumed by the images that flash across our screens that we are regularly neglecting our master and his word, then we have forgotten who owns us. I found that very convicting and helpful. It just, to try to make it simple, think about who owns us, right? And our stewardship. And we want to be mastered by him, okay? So, because it's kind of a slippery slope, there's constant danger. That's why the spiritual disciplines become a necessary prerequisite for us to be able to engage in these kinds of questions, right? Because the spiritual reality is, it's a hook, and it's hard, right, to pull. We can't pull ourselves out by our own bootstraps out of the pull of technology in a negative way. If I were honest with you, there are areas in my use of technology that I think that I need to harness, or I need to take care of better. Okay, I don't feel like I'm enslaved to it, but I'm not untouched by it. Okay, so if anything, just kind of be mindful, prayerful. Oh Lord, how can I re-examine my use of technology for me personally? And I think a lot of it starts with us. And if you're a parent, that's where you should start with. Then it'll inform how you move forward with your own kids. And it'll help with them because they'll say hypocrite or, okay. So I repeated another thing there. But so what is the glorifying motivation is the infinite worth and beauty of Jesus. We were bought with a price. It was at the cost of our Lord and Savior. So some practical practices. Maybe consider doing some spiritual feng shui, right? Rearrange your furniture, facilitate conversation. You don't have to get rid of TV. There's one family I know, they just got rid of it. Or they have it and it's stored in a garage. So they take it out only for a big thing, like a game or movie night. But they don't make access easy. They have it and they use it and enjoy it, but they kind of control it. So they literally put it in the garage. Have ice cream, and then, physical space is helpful for smartphones. And then, do you own your smartphone or does it own you? Constantly ask yourself that question. Okay. And then there's a smartphone covenant that I gave you guys. I used for my teenagers once I gave them a phone. They had to sign it. Okay. I went through it and I walked through, and I didn't just do it in one shot. I did it like a couple times. And then I said, you guys can tell me, you guys can barter with me a little bit, but I'm going to call it, But I made them sign it. And I said, we're not going to Verizon for your first, we're going to get them flip phones, But the reason why I did it for us is because when you sign up for a plan, your first phone is free, right? So I didn't want to settle for a flip phone, man. I want to get my money's worth. You can give me a free phone. Give me the best one. So I got them iPhones. And the reality is their school, there's so much that they have to actually use their phones for on campus, not just at home. So, but I said, they had to sign it before we got to the store. Okay. So I prepped them for it. And of course, they were excited. And they was complaining because all their friends had phones long before they did. But I would argue this. They didn't lose out on anything really important. They're not diminished. They felt diminished. They felt they're missing out. And in some level they were. But not anything consequential or important. Especially not their souls. Okay. So any questions? Sorry I went a little bit longer. But or thoughts or suggestions too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think on the note of the boundaries for the kids and smartphones, how do you, and
and part of this, I think, is like what you outlined for relationship and our own consistency. But
Yeah.
how do you approach that in such a way that they don't resent the boundaries, or at least they grow to appreciate them one day? And also, like, that they don't see you as a hypocrite or extending, removing the boundaries for yourself.
Yeah.
Exercising discipline, but doing so imperfectly.
I would say it provides some accountability for us. Yeah, it does. Because if I'm on the phone, right, scrolling, or I'm playing I only have one game because I'm not good at games. I have a lame game that nobody here has. I play Yahtzee. But Yahtzee's short, right? You're limited by the rolls and then, filling out the grid and it's done. But some other games like Candy Crush, you go on and on and on. That's my argument with Sandy. But so there's some accountability built in just by being in the same household. But yes, I think on a personal level, we have to think through that and guard that. But you communicate. I'm an adult. You're a kid. Just you don't have to apologize for it. But I think we can be sensitive to shepherd it well. But I would say don't feel that you have to get their agreement or make them happy. Okay, but I think if we can kind of appeal to them and bring them in and shape why, then they're better, more accepting of it than us just say, because I said so, I'm your father. That's not always helpful, but sometimes you got to do that. So I would say that comes later if you have to, but not as a first point of contact. I don't know if I answered everything, but in terms of limits, this is me. Every household. Some people are stricter than Sandy and I. Some people are obviously on the other side. But we did time limits. So our kids had iPads, but we would know what apps did they use, And then Sandy, she has a better grasp of like how I'm an Android person, so I don't really know. But what kind of apps they can use are limited. And then if they want access to a certain kind of certain apps, then we pay much more attention. You got to be realistic with what time you have. So you measure some vulnerability with each sort of app and each sort of age. So if like Kristen, when she was on, wanted to watch YouTube for kids things, we are much more like observant than we would if it's just a kid's drawing game. That's not hard to like manage. The difference is, but we had time limits, which were broken a lot. So then we had, I don't know, and maybe they did. Be fair. Like you're immersed in it. You're not looking at the clock, It's easy to go past. But also there are times they knew they went past and they should try to hide it. Okay. So when you discipline, you make it appropriate discipline to the degree of offense, So we had to learn. So you guys can teach me too, but we had to learn along the way what they were doing and what would be wise and what they can get away with. And they probably fooled us, to be honest. Okay. But they also saw that we loved them, we cared, we were concerned about them. So I can say, not as a boast, but I can say our kids maybe they're not the best prepared. We could have done a better job with technology. But they have far less exposure than a lot of other families and kids that I know. And I have no regret about that. I make no apology about that. But I got a lot of criticism. Oh, you guys are too strict. And then some people say, oh, you're not strict enough. But I think time limits were where the device goes. If you guys have good apps where they tell you, it'll ping you like a text or an email if they violate something. We laid out clear consequences because one of our mistakes was we kind of just on the fly come up with the consequence. And the danger is like we weren't always, I don't want to use fair, but not consistent with one child to the other. So the more clear we were about the consequence on the front end and then the level of offense, right? So if you broke it a second time or you went way past, then it was a greater, consequence. Okay. And then we show grace. If it's 5 minutes over, and then patterns. If there was a pattern of repeating, they knew they can get away with it. They're like, oh yeah, that's it's okay. 5 minutes is over. It's okay. Put it away. But they kept doing that. Then I'll have this. Hey, I noticed that you've been like taking advantage of that. Okay. Mom and I talked about it, but you're gonna lose your device for a week. Okay. So sometimes they complain bad because the idolatry of having the device. It's a worship issue. That's the problem. It's not just knowledge and information and using it and not using it. It's a worship problem. Okay? So you got to deal with the worship problem. And that's where family worship and all these other things, having fun with them and, so with that side, we had to develop some consequences, and then they evolved a bit over time. Some kids were more clever. One of our kids, easy, very responsible, very respectful. So now that I look back, maybe she was more clever, and one person was just constant, it's still a little bit difficult. Okay. So, one of our kids who basically, the other kids paved the way. You can guess. And we remind that child, you got more freedom and early access than your siblings. So, and you're the biggest complainer of them all. So I think we made many mistakes. Okay. So my appeal to you and my exhortation to all of us is not that you'll be mistake free, is take ownership of it to do your best to shepherd your kids and yourself through this. Okay. Because none of our parenting or discipleship is going to be perfect. Just no way. But it will make a difference if you embrace it. Any other thoughts or questions, suggestions? Any things that you guys do or think might be a good idea that you heard of?
Sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah.
You did mention how it's ultimately like a bespoke kind of thing per child. How do you talk to the other children about, this child gets more restriction?
Oh, I would try to keep those the same. Generally speaking, but usually it's in the context of breaking the rules, right? So then, because of your repeated violation, the normal consequence would be this, and this is what your siblings get. But because of your pattern of defying these rules, we're amping up the penalty for you. And you can earn it back by, I don't want to do behavior modification, but I'm talking about consequences. So, like generally, like you spank them when they're young, you still have to shepherd their hearts and talk to them. But as they get older, you can't spank them. I remember my mom trying to spank me when I was in high school. And I'm just like, and then she looked at me and she started laughing because she realized I'm not doing anything, And so with our kids, we're about junior high. I stopped spanking them. It wasn't appropriate, especially with the girls. And that's a whole other discussion. But I remember with Toby, I said, you lose video games for a week. No! And then what he said to me? Dad, can I have a spanking instead? Why? Right? It's so easy, quick and easy. That's more painful, the consequence of losing access. He'd rather get a spanking. It's done and over with. I can take it. So, you try to understand each of your children at the age that they are, and so you want to have consistency abroad so that you're not playing favorites or you're prejudiced negatively or positively. Be consistent, but at each stage of life, you're going to make adjustments. Okay, so the phone. If you guys want a soft copy, I could send you the Word. And this is what I've done with some parents. Some people at San Diego, they've asked me for the file. Because I've told them, you could take my file and you can edit it and make it your own and do your own version. Okay? This is just a sample document. Okay? And that's what they've done. Okay? So some parents in our church, I took most of it from the Maven ministry, if you know that ministry. So they have that, and I've modified it to the way I liked it. Okay? So it just provides parameters because they did break it. Okay, so one of the rules we had was they weren't allowed to use their smartphones in the car unless they asked permission, which was basically the specific request like, can I text my friend because I'm dropping them off so they can watch a movie? Can I text them? So yeah. So it could be nothing important. And then maybe long road trips, we'll let them use their phone. But they couldn't even have an out. So when we're going to church, they had their smartphones, but they were not allowed to pull it out of their purse or pocket, and they couldn't access it. So early on, when we had that rule, they would forget. And I'll say, hey, what's the rule? And they go, put it away. And then I would give them warnings early on, and then I started just automatically. As soon as I see it, hey, give me your phone. I remember Toby's like, right, give me your phone. And I grabbed it. And he wouldn't let go. I was like, give me your phone. And he gave the phone. But then they got used to it. And one of the things that helped was sometimes I would play music. And then I said, you know what? They're bored and things like that. They're complaining. I'm going to turn off the music and we're just going to talk. And the whole time we're just having family conversation. And that's so productive. Okay. So we have the no phone or device rule in the car. In the house, we have set time limits. And it was by age. So Kristen, our youngest, she could be in our iPad like half an hour when she was X years old. Okay. The older kids can be on up to 2 hours a day. So we had like varying rules that are based on age. Okay. And then we had rules about consequences. Like if you broke this rule, you'll look at the cell phone contract, there's gradation of consequence. And one of the things is this phone is not yours, this is mom and dad's. So we have the right to take it away from you anytime we want. And even take it and sell it. It's our phone. Okay? We're just letting you use it. Okay? And I think there's rules based on like violations. If you break it the first time, this is the consequence. If you break it the second time, this is the consequence. But the last one is we'll actually take it away. Okay? But we're not going to take it away at the first violation. So hopefully they don't ever get to the point where they lose their phone, and they haven't. So we want to be fair, Our goal is not to be oppressive. We tell them we want to train you so that you use your phones in a God-honoring way. Okay? And that when you leave our house, we have no control what you do, but we hope we've trained you enough that you're using it well. Not perfectly well. So, sorry, that was a long answer. Anyway, probably should wrap it up. But thanks, guys. I know it's a long, my things are long, huh? But something to think about. Okay. I taught this because I felt like with our families in San Diego, we needed help with tackling technology in the home. By the time I taught it, we were already late in the game. Anyway, let me pray. Okay, Father, thank you for technology, and we thank you for your word that helps us to navigate that well. In Jesus' name.